Jury selection began in the trial of Michael Slager, the ex-South Carolina police officer accused of shooting and killing Walter Scott, who was unarmed at the time back in April of 2015. It was all kept quiet for several days until the New York Times shared cell video showing Scott running away while Slager shot him in the back, firing 8 times and then handcuffing him. If convicted, Slager could be sentenced to 30 years to life in prison for Scott's murder. The spotlight has shined on police shootings of unarmed black men in recent years with videos like the one obtained by the Times. It all started with Michael Brown. Some witnesses say the 18-year-old was shot 6 times and killed by an officer while he had his hands up in the air. Others say he was moving toward the officer at the time. But a grand jury's refusal to indict the officer, Darren Wilson, set off torrents of protest. And as Christina Quinn tells us, for one UMass Boston professor, those protests hit particularly close to home.
Even though music professor David Patterson has been teaching at UMass Boston for over 4 decades, he'll always be a son of Ferguson. But when the nation turned its attention to his home in August of 2014, it was a shock.
All I could say is to my wife, that can't be Ferguson. And then I followed the news and followed and replay after replay and this view and that view on what was happening. In a way, I was being brought into the Times more than I knew because of my many visits back. I wasn't aware of all of this change.
The national focus on the place where he grew up was a wake-up call for Patterson, who set out to write a music suite titled #Ferguson.
I wanted to say something about my growing up there. It was an all-white city. We would see just a few plaques. And then the now came into my mind. Well, what do we do about the now?
#Ferguson is a 23-minute suite in response to Michael Brown's death. That's also a personal odyssey, cataloging Patterson's relationship with his hometown.
This is the very beginning.
This is the very beginning. It's where I lived. It's called 411 North Clay. I grew up there. And this is what my neighbors would have heard, this, scales.
The title of each scene in the suite notes a time and place in Ferguson. The first half made up of scenes from his home, classroom, and church, capturing the innocence and mystery of youth.
Mystery and wonder, the little 12-year-old boy, yes, doesn't know what's going to happen 50-some-odd years later, has no idea. Then comes 8, 9, 14, parenthesis, that day. And the close, going back to the garden. But of course, with the dissonance and a changed mind about that garden.
And what can only follow that is the Ferguson Blues. But Patterson has faith in his city and hope, and in the final scene he captures it with "Hands Up, Let's Pray," a closing hymn for this musical journey through a changing landscape. Christina Quinn, WGBH News.